The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read. Your source for news, politics, sports, and all things trending. Here's your host, Marcus Gentry.
And you can understand where the judge's frustration is coming from. If January 6th was a violent insurrection against the government, an attempt to block the peaceful transition of power in our democracy, the consequences for that cannot just be a few hundred people being charged with holding an illegal parade. Because it's not what each individual person did on their own. It's what everybody involved did collectively. That's the insurrection. And we do have a body that's tackling this bigger picture. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack is reportedly moving ahead with its work, even if we haven't heard all that much from them publicly in recent weeks.
Welcome to the Daily Read, and I am your host, Marcus Gentry. Now, I played that clip for you because I wanted to do today's show on the lessons that has not been learned on all of this insurrection, rising up against the government. We haven't learned our lessons from the Civil War, people. And I'm afraid history is repeating itself. You see, the reason why history is repeating itself because you got individuals who stormed our Capitol trying to overthrow the government and stop a duly elected president. They lost. Okay, you literally had Confederate flags waving inside the Capitol. These people are crazy, nuts, and a lot of them are bigots and racists. Okay, we need to get that understood. And I know I haven't really been focusing on my show lately. I have books coming out. I have a television network. By the way, some of you guys who have Roku TV or Fire Stick, you can find me on All Urban Access. All Urban Access. That's my television network. So I've been busy, and I try to keep up with my show at least once every 2 weeks or once every week. So I'm going to try to refocus on that and get back to it. But believe me, people, when I tell you, we are so focused on self-aggrandizement, things that's happening in the news with our entertainers. We're so focused on garbage and nonsense that we don't understand and recognize what's actually happening in this country that really hasn't taken place since the 40s and 50s. This is some serious stuff. I'm gonna play a series of clips for you, because I think this is important for people to really grasp and understand how this is being played out when it comes to our government and our politics. We have a lot of people in this country who have been groomed by the very same racist people over the decades who rose up during the Confederacy. And if you follow today's show, you're going to have a clear understanding on how this happened. Let's check out our first clip.
Even as many of the people who physically breached the Capitol on January 6th have been tracked down and arrested and made to apologize in open court and pay some kind of price, the people who created the conditions for that attack, the people who teed up the event and stoked the crowds and who turned the January 6th certification of the election into something that they thought had to be stopped, those people are not only walking around free, they are still pushing the narrative that produced the insurrection.
This is the same thing that happened during the Civil War. You see, right after Lincoln was killed, most of the people who participated in the government side, not the soldiers, a lot of the soldiers paid a heavy price because they were shot, they lost legs, they lost arms, they lost eyes. They were never the same because they actually fought the war. I'm not talking about them. They're the same people who are like the guys that stormed the Capitol. They're the grunts. But the people who instigated the grunts, who started all of this in motion, have basically faded back into our society, faded back into the darkness. and they're still plotting. We got to have an understanding about this. They're still plotting. Just like after the Civil War, during the Civil War, they had their own Congress. They had their own president. They had their own vice president. You know, these people were actually starting up a shadow government to rival and match America's government. Same thing going on today. You got ex-president Donald Trump down in Mar-a-Lago running around acting like he's still the president. He's telling these people, don't go up here and testify for the January 6th commission because of executive privilege. He don't have executive privilege anymore because he's a former president. He's not even our president anymore. So we got to get this understood. We are still living in the time of these people trying to overthrow our government, and it's running parallel to the history of what happened during the Civil War. You got judges even coming out and saying, I can't believe you guys are not charging these people with more charges than what you giving them. This is crazy. Let's go farther into this.
Take this lawyer, John Eastman. He's revving up the crowds here at the president's Stop the Steal rally just before those crowds stormed the Capitol. Eastman was not well known at the time, but we've recently learned that he was the author of a memo for President Trump that detailed exactly how Trump could use the January 6th election certification process to overturn Joe Biden's win and remain in power. And Trump and his allies were following Eastman's instruction manual right up until January 6th, when Vice President Mike Pence refused to carry out his part of the plot.
You see, if Mike Pence would have been just a little more conniving and diabolical, or he had a little more evil in his heart and not a little bit of dignity like he has, if he would have said he's not recognizing Joe Biden as president, it would have threw this whole country into chaos. We would have been living in a time of a new civil war. You see, the white supremacists haven't thought this through. Okay? White supremacists in America haven't thought this through, people. You have minorities in the military and in the police departments all across this country. Okay? Now, with these people that's involved in the military and the police departments, you also have blacks and minorities who are not down with bigotry. You have white supremacists that's involved in police departments and military. Then you have people who are not down with white supremacy. So what's going to happen is, right now, all of the police are on one accord. You know, the boys in blue, they stick by each other. Military, same thing, they stick by each other. But the moment Mike Pence would have said he's not recognizing this government, that would have threw this whole country into chaos, and our law enforcement would have been split. You already had lawyers and prosecutors and district attorneys threatening to quit if Donald Trump did what he was planning on doing, taking over the government. That would have had a ripple effect all the way down through the legal departments, through the police stations, through the through all of this. You would have had police fighting police officers, trying to protect their communities. You would have had whites rising up, blacks rising up. These people don't understand the peril that they put this country in by this crazy stunt that they pulled. We'll get into the next the next video.
John Eastman's memo is one of the most terrifying pieces of evidence that has yet to come to light from those last several weeks of the Trump administration. It shows just how much planning went into trying to keep Trump in power after he lost, and how close they came to succeeding. But not only has John Eastman so far successfully wandered off back into semi-obscurity after the whole coup thing didn't work out, he's still working at it.
Basically, he's telling you, Ali Vashi, I like Ali Vashi. Ali Vashi is a good newscaster. He does politics, but he also does, financial too. He's a very intelligent man, and he's not an original American. He came here, I think, from either Canada, I think Canada or Australia, one of the two, and he got his citizenship. Very intelligent man, but he knows that. And he's not telling you the history of it. I'm speaking on the history of this and how it's repeating itself. These people are going to keep repeating it and repeating it until they one day win. We got to shut this down. You can give a man 20 years for a half ounce of cocaine, but you can't give 20 or 30 years to a person that tries to overthrow our government. This is serious. This is serious, people. All of these people who tried to overthrow the government, only the people that's being prosecuted are the actual rioters. The people who set all of this in motion, they done started blending back into society. You see how I'm moving back in my chair? They're starting to blend back into society, just like that. Fade back into the darkness. But they're still active. They're still out here spreading their hatred. They're still out here plotting and planning on the next elections, on the next presidential election. And there's no telling what they're going to do, because they already have a blueprint. They have a blueprint on how they're going to try to take this country. And I don't think some of you guys is getting this. We got to have this understanding. We got to get this understood so we can know how to protect our families. Because a lot of these people are armed. But in their minds, they thinking that it's going to go a certain way that it's not. Because this is not the 40s and 50s where you had 80 to 90% of American whites against black people. Back then, if they would have tried something like this, they would have had the majority of the country riding with them, because the majority of the country still had bigotry and hatred in their heart. But what these bigots and these white supremacists is not understanding is, it's not like that now. They're still trying to make their moves to take over the country like they did during the Civil War, but they don't get it. That shit's not gonna work. All you're gonna do is cause death and destruction in the streets. This country is gonna go down in flames. I'm gonna get into this first commercial break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about the Civil War a little bit. We're going to touch on it a little bit and talk about how the roots of it is still having an effect to this day.
The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read.
The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read.
And Martha Hodes, I want to start with you. Is it possible to speak of one reaction to Lincoln's assassination? What happened in the days that followed?
Well, it isn't possible to speak of one reaction. African Americans, both North and South, and white Northerners felt that there was one reaction. They felt the whole country was shocked and in grief. But in fact, they knew that there were other people who were not responding as they were responding. Confederates, Lincoln's northern enemies, the Copperheads, even some members of Lincoln's own party were relieved that he had been assassinated because they thought he would be too lenient on the Confederates.
Now, when Lincoln died, he was already trying to appease Southern Democrats. They're called the Southern Dixie Democrats. He was already trying to appease them and keep them calm, because even though we won the Civil War, he was actually trying to keep this country together. I understand that. But I didn't understand, and I don't understand how you can't charge these people and have them locked up for 20 and 30 years. He basically was lenient on them and let them go. A lot of these people went back to their homes in the South and was treated like heroes. They had statues built in their honor. Those same statues we're trying to tear down to this day. You lost. Why do you even have a statue of yourself in your community? You lost the Civil War. We don't want to see that. You tried to rebel against the country. So now what you have going on is the same thing. History is repeating itself. History is repeating itself. You had the people who started the whole Civil War, who rebelled in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas. You had all of these southern states that tried to rebel against the government, and the only people that really paid the price were the soldiers themselves, because them people lost their lives, they lost limbs, they lost eyes, they lost arms. You see them old pictures of the Civil War, men standing up there with one leg. They're the only ones that really paid a price for that. All of those people who instigated that, they basically were cheered on back in their hometowns in some small town in Mississippi somewhere. Some group of elders probably built a statue in their honor. Like, yeah, you fought hard. You lost, but you fought hard. Come on, man. We got to have an understanding that these people are still at it. We got to break this, because one of these days they're going to succeed in it. And it's going to throw this whole country into total chaos. You're going to have people in the streets. Let's get to this next video. This is interesting.
You were looking at personal stories, right, in your work. Did you see things already that kind of stayed as themes through time, even up to our own time?
Yes, what I found was at the moment of Lincoln's assassination, those hours, days, and weeks right afterwards, which is a time that people haven't explored deeply, and that's the reading I did in all of these personal sources, those responses foretold clashing visions of the nation's future, and we see the legacies of that today.
It was there already.
It was there already, right from the start.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of clashes were most obvious from the start?
Well, the question of black freedom was very, very important. So African Americans and their white allies wanted more than freedom. They wanted equality, they wanted suffrage, they wanted land and education, and they wanted that with federal enforcement. Mm-hmm. The former Confederates wanted their own political rights back. White Southerners wanted to be part of the political process again, and they wanted no federal interference. And that's a legacy that we see to this day.
Now, remember what I said. All of those Southerners lost the right to participate in government. The ones who instigated. That's really the only thing that happened to them. That's it. But they were still out here amongst us, able to spread their hatred, able to teach their kids how to be an evil, racist politician. And then they sent their kids or their cousins or a good friend's son into politics. They couldn't get into politics anymore because they tried to rebel against the country. But they never went to jail for 20 or 30 years for it. They never got life in prison. You see, a lot of this stuff that we're going through today is past mistakes. It's past mistakes. and we keep repeating it. We got to break this, because what's going to happen is, after these people that rioted at the Capitol serve 6 months or get probation, they're going to go back to their communities and be treated like heroes, like they did something righteous and special. And then, as true as the lies get spread, the truth gets further and further behind us. 100 years from now, people gonna try to build statues in their honor, like they did something great. This is how democracy dies. This is how America is gonna die. America right now is gasping for breath. It's on its deathbed. And hopefully we can pull it off the deathbed and keep moving. But right now, things is looking bad. Let's get into this next video.
You know, Isabel Wilkerson, a nation, a sense of a moment of possibility that you were speaking of a little earlier, right after the war, and yet so much pain still to come for so many people, as you document later.
Well, absolutely. There was that 12-year period of time that we call Reconstruction, that brief window of opportunity in which we often think of civil rights legislation applying to the 20th century, but the civil rights legislation, as the professor mentioned, of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which were to have secured the rights, the new rights for the newly freed people, ended up only being recognized for an all too brief period of time, and then set in motion after the doors had been opened. They were quickly slammed shut with the introduction of what would be called the Jim Crow caste system, in which there were these rules and laws and customs that repressed the efforts of these newly freed people just as they were beginning to hope for something better. And this set in motion essentially 90 years of repressive laws, of what we think of as the water fountains in the restrooms would have been just the beginning of it. But every aspect of life for people was restricted and could be punished with severity, meaning the lynchings that would occur at one point every 4 days in the American South.
You know, she's making it clear and plain, and I know I have a mixture of viewers. Some people can understand, some people can't. Some people need to study a little more on it. Do your research. You know, if you can't really get this, I'm trying to give you a history of how this history is coming back. It done came back 3 times. I'm explaining the 3 times this history has repeated itself. After the Civil War, there was a Reconstruction era. Okay, there was a Reconstruction era after the Civil War, and came the Jim Crow laws. The Great Depression, and back then, minorities might have been freed, but they were still oppressed, got the short end of the stick. After the Depression in the 30s, there was a brief period of Reconstruction, because we had to reconstruct our government again to keep a meltdown from happening again. Black people got the short end of the stick again. The Jews, the Italians, the Germans, and the Irish, they rose up after the 30s. They came up, but blacks got the short end of the stick again. Now we have coronavirus. Our financial state right now is almost in a reconstruction type era, because everything got shut down when the virus first hit. So now they're trying to make it to where if they put the people in power that they want to have in power, we're going to get the short end of the stick again. All of this is about keeping minorities oppressed and depressed financially, and have white power in this country to be maintained. That's what all of this is about. They're making laws right now all across this country to oppress the vote. Let's go on to this next video.
I just want to go around to all three of you briefly, if I could, because there's so much fascination. I'll start with you, Isabel Wilkerson. We'll go in reverse order here. There is so much fascination with this period, and I wonder why, for you personally, you're so interested in looking at the Civil War and its legacy.
Well, I think it's the fulcrum of the identity of our country. It was the moment at which people very passionate about how they felt about our country were making choices about and arguing and willing to fight and die for what the country was supposed to be, what we are as a country, who could be a citizen of our country, what did the country stand for, and what was it going to be going forward. And I think that because we are still dealing with the long shadow of that war and of the consequences of that war and the unresolved questions of that war, it still haunts us to this day.
And basically what she's telling you people is, you know, this history is repeating itself. It's coming back full swing. This is like the third time. Actually, to me, it's the fourth time. Because if you think about it, there was a man who ran against Nixon. There was a man who ran against Nixon. His name is on the tip of my tongue, but he was bad, people. I'm talking about he was a bigot, and he didn't care who knew he was a bigot. And he had half the country willing to vote for him. Now Nixon, he was the type of person who wanted, you know, blacks to have their equal, but he wanted us separated. You know, he wasn't too far from a bigot himself, Nixon. But this guy who ran against Nixon, I'm finna find his name. The guy who ran against Nixon, and I did a whole show on this guy. I can't believe his name. I can't believe his name. It went. Not George McGovern. Not Kennedy. I'm gonna find his name, people, because this is important. This is important. This guy, think of his name. And I just did a whole show on this guy. I can't believe it. I have a mind blur right now. But anyway, it'll come to me. It'll come to me in a minute. But this guy who ran against Nixon, you know, he had a famous quote where he said, blacks in this country will always be considered unequal and slaves and all of this. I mean, he actually quoted this out. He didn't say it behind closed doors where somebody outed him. This guy was the full-fledged thing. He was out open racist. The same way Donald Trump came out talking about how you know, Mexicans were rapists and murderers and stuff like that. This guy was the same deal. He was the same. He was flat out with it. And if he would have became president, oh my God, some of the things that we blacks have today, we probably wouldn't even have. You know, some of the rights and freedoms we probably wouldn't have right now. This guy was crazy, and I can't believe I can't think of his name, but I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it in a minute. But it wasn't McGovern. It was somebody else. But let's get back into this next video, because this is important, people. History is repeating itself, and I want you guys to listen to this guy who lived through the 40s and 50s, and now he's a historian. And the reason he became a historian because he saw the parallels between the time he was a young man living in America to the Civil War, because of how they were treating minorities. right after the Civil War, and then he was looking at the civil rights movement and how things was moving. Listen to this guy.
Your recent book where you look back at your younger self, right, when you first got interested in this.
Well, I was a graduate student in Baltimore in the late 1950s and early 1960s at Johns Hopkins University. Those were the years of the Montgomery bus boycott, the sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Freedom Riders, extended into the early 1960s, Martin Luther King's speech at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, his I Have a Dream speech in 1963. I was struck by the parallels between the time in which I was living and the events of exactly 100 years earlier, a confrontation between North and South, between the national government and Southern political leaders vowing massive resistance to national law, federal troops being sent into the South to enforce national law. There was a kind of deja vu about what was going on in my own time, and I just decided that I needed to learn about the historical roots of my own world.
I think it was McGovern. But I think it was another man that he ran against that was flat out bigot. Well, I'm gonna get to it, but this guy is basically telling you people how he's basically telling you how we keep repeating history, and one of these times these people that's doing this, they're gonna win. One of these times they're gonna win, and when they win, it's gonna throw this whole country into a free fall, a battle royal. Now, when I get back off this next commercial break, I have a message for minorities out there, whether you're Hispanic, Black, Asian, whatever type of minority you are. You have to understand also that there are minorities in this country who have learned to tap dance and make millions off of riding with white supremacy. They don't want the system to change. They don't care about the system changing because they've learned to make their money in this system, and money to them keeps them above it. They're not safe by no means, because a rich black man in a Ferrari can still get murdered by the police. But even though they're not safe and because of their skin color, they have opportunities to separate themselves in big mansions and surrounded by a cast iron gate. You know, these are the Kanye West people of the world. You know, they don't want this to change. They're going to ride with the white supremacy all the way to the end, and right now, half of them done blended back in. Remember what I told you earlier, how I sat back in my chair? A lot of them, they done blended back into society. They trying to get their black card back. You know, they see the way the wind blowing. Right now the wind is blowing towards the Democrats and Joe Biden. So now they've sat back and faded back into the darkness. But in secret, they're still in communication with all of these white supremacists. You know, and every now and then the white supremacists will pull them out, like Larry Elder. You know, they got him out here trying to be governor of California. We're going to this next commercial break, and when we get back, we're going to discuss that even further.
The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read.
I'm ready.
Camera's ready.
I'm ready. Welcome to Are You Scared Talent Shows. It's a new talent show that we put on TV for y'all to get used to, because these people can't act, and so we're gonna show y'all what the real deal is when you get on front of the camera and what some garbage acting look like. I tell you, garbage acting. This is Are You Scared Talent Shows, okay? We're gonna show y'all some acts of some talents. $5,000. It really ain't $5,000. I just said $5,000 because $5,000 sound like some people want to come and join a talent show if it was paying $5,000. So I'm your host, Eric Jones. Are you scared of talent shows?
The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read.
Black conservative Larry Elder is now making a case for slave owners to have reparations while still dismissing descendants of the enslaved having reparations. Here it is.
Right behind them.
By the way, when you mentioned that the UK was ahead of us, they were. Do you know that the slave owners were compensated? After they lost their quote-unquote property, the government compensated slave owners.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so when people talk about reparations, do they really want to have that conversation? Because, like it or not, slavery was legal. And so their property, their legal property, was taken away from them after the Civil War. So you can make an argument that the people that are owed reparations, and not only just black people, but also the people whose quote property, close quote, was taken away after the end of the Civil War.
Now, this guy, oh my God, Larry Elder and Candace Owens. This is what I meant for all my minorities out there that watch my show. This is what I meant by you're going to have backstabbers in the minority community that's going to ride with these bigots and bigotry. They're going to ride with it because they have an understanding that their butter is bread. Their bread is buttered by these people. They get money by these people, by standing on the side of these people. You know, how many people you know in the black community that has ever went to the Oval Office, but Kanye West got a chance to go and hug up on Donald Trump? You see, this is what I mean when I say privilege, money. They don't care about what happens to the rest of their people in the communities. They don't care about that, long as they're good and their kids are good. But what they don't realize is those people don't care about them neither. Their life is still in danger, but the percentage of something happening to one of them is less. They're good with that. They're okay with that. They don't care about that. Like Candace Owens, she runs a podcast like I run a podcast. Her podcast, I've been doing mine longer than her. Her podcast took off like a rocket. Because white supremacists, they love to have somebody in the black community talk bad about other blacks. It appeals to them. This is how she gets her money. Do I believe deep down in her heart she loves them? I don't think so. But that's the sacrifice that she's willing to live with. She made up in her mind she's willing to live with it as long as she can live good. That's sad. These people make me sick to my stomach every time I see them on TV. And Larry Elder, they call him the Black Donald Trump. This guy, you know, he's going around telling white people, you know, you're the ones who should get reparation because slavery was the law back then and you had your property taken from you. You can't make this stuff up, people. And white people love this guy. They love this guy. You know, that Larry Elder, he's speaking the truth. You know, it's crazy. You got to understand how we fighting the fight against white supremacy, but we got backstabbers in our community too that's doing better than you, that's gonna lie to your face and tell you, man, that ain't no racism, you just gotta tap dance. You know, they're basically telling you, you got to be a white man's Negro and don't worry about fighting against the system. That's basically what they're telling you. This is serious. This is real life. This is happening. We haven't had nothing like this happen since the 40s and 50s, but the only difference is they have more minorities on their side now. This is dangerous. I hope you guys learned a lesson from today. You know, I try to bring real stuff to you. And hopefully I'll be back on air next Sunday. And this is the Daily Read. Keep your head up. Keep the fight going. And we out.
The business, motherfucker.
The Daily Read.
Business.